Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. The room smelled like money. Polished leather shoes, cologne that cost more than my first car, freshly dry-cleaned suits. It all clung to the air like entitlement. The corporate auditorium was packed with high-ranking execs from Titan Global Security, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings as they swapped stories over tiny bottles of sparkling water. I stood 3 rows behind my father and brother, heels tucked together, hands clasped tight behind my back. Just another data grunt, as my brother liked to say. Keyboard warriors don't win wars, he had chuckled not even 5 minutes earlier, but at least they can spell them right. My father had laughed along, slow and condescending. You don't need brains to spot malware, you need Google. I said nothing. I never did. My name is Danielle. I'm 31. I live in Arlington, Virginia, and I work as a cyber intelligence analyst for Titan Global. But you wouldn't find my name in any public report, not in any headline, not even on the company's org chart. That's because most of what I do, most of what I am, lives in the shadows. And tonight, I was supposed to stay in those shadows. Then the CEO stepped on stage. She was tall, sharp-featured, and terrifying in that effortless way only people at the top can be. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice crisp and clear. "Tonight we gather to honor a handful of individuals who've made extraordinary contributions to our mission. But before we hand out the usual plaques and pins, there's one more name. Well, code name I need to mention." The room shifted, eyes turned. My father leaned in toward my brother. "This'll be good," he muttered. The CEO held up a small silver emblem. Not flashy, not the size of a trophy, just a tiny lapel pin with a matte black finish and a barely visible symbol etched into the center. "We need the person known internally as Cipher 7 to please come forward." A beat. Silence. My father's shoulders tensed. My brother glanced around. Then I stepped forward. People started rising to their feet. I heard it. First the confused murmurs, then the applause. Hesitant at first, then swelling like a wave. The CEO waited, smiling. Not at me. At the reaction. When I reached the stage, she didn't say my real name. She didn't need to. "This woman," she said, turning slightly to address the room, "has stopped 3 separate cyber assault campaigns in the last 18 months, one of which would have crippled U.S. infrastructure. She is the reason 3 global banks still exist. She is the reason half this room still has a job." A ripple went through the crowd. I caught sight of my father's face, blank, like his brain hadn't processed it yet. My brother? Staring, like I was a stranger. The CEO pinned the emblem on my lapel and shook my hand. "On behalf of everyone you've protected, thank you." The room erupted. I didn't cry, I didn't smile, I just nodded and let the weight of that moment settle into my spine. I'd always been invisible, but now they saw me, not just as the data geek in the corner, but as the force behind the firewall. Hey, Cipher 7, and for the first time in my life, my father had nothing to say. Our house was loud in the strangest way. My father's voice filled every corner. Sharp commands, blunt lectures, the occasional barked laugh when the evening news matched something he'd predicted. But my mother? She hadn't spoken a word since I was 7. It wasn't a choice. Some rare neurological condition. Something too complex for my young brain to understand. One day she just stopped talking. No more bedtime stories, no more humming while folding laundry. Just the sound of her footsteps, the soft rustle of her sleeves, the clink of her teacup on the kitchen counter. I missed her voice more than anything. My father didn't, he adjusted fast, took over every conversation. "There's 2 kinds of work in this world," he'd say over dinner, stabbing his fork toward my brother and me. "Work with your back and work with your fists. Anything else is just people pretending." My brother, 3 years older, nodded like it was gospel. I stared down at my plate and counted the peas. 8, then 16. Then I'd start again. I learned young that noise didn't always mean something was being said, and that silence, in the right hands, could speak louder than anything. That's how I found codes. It started with a torn page from a kid's magazine left at the bus stop, a puzzle made of 1s and 0s. I didn't know what binary was yet, but I figured it out that night, sitting cross-legged on the carpet with a flashlight under my chin. A was O1R0R0R1. B was O1R0R0Rs. It made sense in a way nothing else did. My father called it a phase. "You need a hammer, not a damn calculator," he muttered when he caught me soldering wires onto a busted motherboard I'd pulled from someone's trash. "That crap won't help you in the real world." But my mother, she never said anything, couldn't say anything. Instead, she left me little offerings, a dog-eared cipher wheel tucked into my backpack, a thrift store book about secret agents hidden under my pillow, a pack of colored pencils arranged on my desk in Morse code. I never asked how she managed it. I just knew it was her way of saying, I see you. The neighbor next door had a shortwave radio set up in his garage. Most kids ignored it. I was fascinated. I used to sit outside his open window and listen to the static, the broken chatter of voices in languages I didn't know. He caught me once, and instead of shooing me away, handed me a soldering iron and said, Want to learn how to build one? That was the first time someone didn't laugh when I said I liked codes. He just nodded, like it made perfect sense. I didn't know it then, but I was already preparing, already watching patterns, listening to what wasn't being said, learning how to read a world that didn't care if you had a loud voice, only if you understood what the silence meant. The entrance exam was brutal. 2 hours of cryptography, digital forensics, and a timed capture the flag challenge with code puzzles written to confuse even seasoned professionals. I finished it in 41 minutes. Not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I had already seen every variant of the puzzle logic they threw at us. Half of it felt like a warm-up. The professor proctoring the room, a thin man in tortoiseshell glasses, raised an eyebrow when I handed him my packet. You're either very confident, he said, or very wrong. I guess we'll see, I said, then walked out. That was the first week at the Hartwell Institute's cybersecurity program, one of the most competitive in the country, the kind of place where the students didn't just have high GPAs, but government internships, published papers, or trust funds with the right last name. I had none of that. Just a laptop with a cracked case, 2 years of community college credits, and a brain wired for patterns. By the third week, I already had a reputation. Quiet, unassuming, but fast. The kind of fast that made people whisper. It didn't take long for the whispering to turn into ridicule. You know the thing about brute force? Said Cole Danvers one afternoon in the lab. Eventually, even the most basic script kiddie gets lucky. He said it loud enough for the whole row to hear. Tall, smug, and born into a family with a history of defense contracting, Cole had all the arrogance of someone who had never failed at anything and couldn't imagine someone like me succeeding. I didn't respond. I just leaned over my keyboard and opened the assignment. It was a test scenario, an intercepted encrypted message with a timestamp and a simulated geolocation. Everyone else stared at it like it was in another language. To me, it wasn't just data, it was a dialect. The hash signature looked off. Something local but not domestic. The encryption style reminded me of a Russian variant I'd seen on a darknet forum 2 years ago. I checked the hex values, cross-referenced them with some older attack patterns I had logged, and decrypted it in under 5 minutes. My screen displayed the message. Payload ready for drop. Target confirmed. Initiate on 1703 UTC. I raised my hand. You're done? The professor asked, glancing at the timer. It's a real transmission, I said. There's a signature here that matches a known APT group. This isn't just practice data. Someone slipped in something live. He looked skeptical, until I showed him my screen. 3 days later, he pulled me aside. You weren't wrong, he said. You found something we weren't supposed to find. We're alerting the agency. I nodded. He looked at me like I was something unfamiliar, like I wasn't supposed to be the one who found it. After that, I started keeping my own records. I didn't trust the system to remember what I'd done, not officially. So I encrypted everything. My theories, my observations, my predictions. I wasn't just analyzing data anymore. I was mapping patterns, building timelines, spotting attacks before they happened. I started predicting cyber events with 90% accuracy. Cole stopped making comments. So did everyone else. They didn't understand how I could hear things in code, like a melody under the noise. I didn't need them to. I wasn't there to be liked. I was there to learn how to listen better. I still remember the day I got the acceptance email. The screen lit up with the subject line. Congratulations, Danielle. Fellowship awarded. My chest tightened. For a second, I didn't breathe. I had won a grant from the TriNet Cyber Defense Initiative, a program that only accepted 5 people a year. It wasn't just funding or prestige. It meant I'd built something that mattered. I printed the letter, walked downstairs, and held it out to my father like a trophy. He barely looked up from the TV. What's this? I got it, I said. The fellowship. They picked me for my AI detection model, the one that flags bot-generated online personas. Remember? He grunted. You still working on that computer game thing? It's not a game, I said, trying to stay calm. It detects identity farms used in financial fraud. It's already caught. He waved a hand. Sure. But does it work in the real world? Can it move trucks, secure a warehouse, keep people alive? I stood there, the paper still in my hand. My brother walked in, tie loose, sleeves rolled up like he'd just come from running someone's supply chain. Still chasing zeros and ones? He smirked. Real leadership's earned in the field, Danny. You should come see the operation sometime. Might learn something. I didn't answer. There was no point. That night, I shut the door to my room and stared at the walls, plastered in printed code, scribbled logic maps, clippings about cyber attacks I had studied down to the bite. To them, it was clutter. To me, it was proof. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, encrypted a new log file, and started again. I stopped looking for validation after that. Instead, I emailed the professor who had mentored me during the project, then another analyst who'd published work I admired. I started building a network, quiet, professional, and far from home. They read my logs, they asked questions, they offered introductions. One even called my detection model instinctive. I saved that message. I read it the next time my father asked me to fix the Wi-Fi like I was still a teenager. I knew then that I didn't need their approval. I had found my purpose elsewhere, and it was just getting started. The simulation was supposed to be routine, an internal cyber warfare drill designed to stress test the company's response systems. A lot of posturing. A lot of team leads puffing up their chests. Most people treated it like a strategy game. I didn't. I was stationed in the observation room, tucked between two junior techs clicking between dashboards like they were playing whack-a-mole. One of them, a guy named Vince, leaned back in his chair and said, "You know, you could just use the AI flag set. No need to scan raw feeds like it's 1995. "I like to hear the patterns," I replied, not looking away from my screen. He snorted. "Sure, Morse girl. You do that." I ignored him. The simulated attack was unfolding across multiple endpoints, with fake ransomware hitting financial, energy, and healthcare sectors. All scripted, all predictable. But something in the hospital sector's data felt off. It wasn't the usual noise. There were anomalies buried in the timestamp sequences, blips in server handshakes, a strange echo in the signal trail, like someone piggybacking on the test infrastructure. I pulled up the raw logs. It was subtle, buried deep under the dummy traffic. A real payload was hiding inside the exercise, timed to activate during the fake breach. A live ransomware worm targeting the hospital's patient scheduling system. I froze for half a second, then acted. I flagged the server, isolated the IP chain, and ran an emergency kill script that severed the tunnel. The payload collapsed before it executed. The breach never happened. No alarms went off, no headlines, no scramble, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when disaster brushes past and doesn't realize it missed. 10 minutes later, the exercise ended. Everyone clapped and filed out for snacks in the break room. I stayed at my terminal, exporting a clean log, encrypting the activity, and filing it under a locked partition. No one asked what I had done. No one realized the ransomware was real, except Vince. In the break room, he stood awkwardly next to the coffee machine as I walked in. He didn't meet my eyes, didn't say anything about the AI flag sets or old-school code listening. He just stepped aside and let me pour my tea. The official report chalked up the anomaly to uncatalogued background noise. My name wasn't mentioned. It never was. But that night, I opened my personal archive and recorded every detail. The signature of the worm, the hash values, the save point where lives were spared but no one would ever know. Some people save the world in the light. I do it in silence. It started with a single line of code, something that shouldn't have been there. I was running a routine audit on internal logs, not for glory, just habit. A time-stamped access record looked off. Too clean, like someone had gone in after the fact and swept up their footprints but missed a speck. I pulled the backup logs. That's when I saw it. A report I'd written 2 weeks earlier, an internal vulnerability flagged in a finance sector client's infrastructure, had been edited, not corrected, not expanded. Just rewritten. Key phrasing was removed. The risk level downgraded, my name replaced with Department Oversight. I opened 2 more reports. Same pattern, someone was erasing me. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. My internal alerts, flag threats, warning notes, they were being edited or rerouted through another office entirely. Buried, reattributed, all signs pointed to one division, Strategic Operations, and that division belonged to my brother. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then came the breach, a supposedly resolved client issue. One I had flagged a month earlier as still vulnerable was hit by a silent intrusion, a real one. The attackers exploited the exact window I had documented and escalated before it disappeared from the system. They siphoned $6 million in under 7 minutes. The report that went up the chain blamed a breakdown in communication. No one took responsibility, except I remembered that case. I remembered writing the alert, and I had the original draft. That night, I started building my own archive. Every discrepancy, every altered document, every scrubbed line of credit. I encrypted and timestamped each one, storing them off-network, split across multiple encrypted volumes. No confrontation, no accusations. Just quiet evidence. I didn't need to corner my brother in a hallway. I didn't need to argue with my father about real leadership or how I should be focusing on team unity, not personal credit. That wasn't the point anymore. This wasn't just about my name. This was about truth, about the risk he was letting through the cracks for the sake of a cleaner track record and faster promotions. I watched him in the cafeteria one day, laughing with a group of executives. He wore the same grin our father had when he talked about winning the old school way. I knew then that I could never let him keep gaming the system at someone else's expense. He wasn't just taking credit. He was putting lives, businesses, entire infrastructures at risk. So I documented, I waited, I prepared, and when the time came, I would have everything I needed. Truth encoded, time-stamped, bulletproof. He made me invisible. Now he wouldn't see me coming. The auditorium lights dimmed just enough to draw silence, the kind that prickled under your skin. Rows of suits lined the front, polished shoes crossed neatly, faces stiff with ceremony. The year-end security awards at Titan Global were always an exercise in ego and optics. I never expected this one to be any different. I spotted my father and brother near the aisle. Row 1, of course. My father with his usual upright posture, arms folded across his chest like every award not bearing his name was a delay in the program. My brother, all smirk and self-satisfaction, whispering something to the VP beside him, probably another line about keyboard warriors and the over-glorification of code monkeys. Then the CEO took the stage. She didn't carry notes. She didn't need them. This year, our global security teams prevented over a dozen major threats. Some were visible, many were not. But a few, the most dangerous ones, were intercepted by someone whose name you won't find on any press release. The room hushed. My heart started to pound. She's worked anonymously for years, protecting critical infrastructure, financial institutions, and human lives. She predicted a ransomware assault on hospital networks before it happened, traced a financial heist targeting pension systems across 3 continents, and when a foreign syndicate attempted to exfiltrate trade secrets worth billions, she was the firewall that held. There were murmurs now, people glancing around, whispers of, "Who?" The CEO smiled faintly. She doesn't seek recognition, but it's time we give it anyway. She turned slightly toward my section. We need the person known internally as Cipher 7 to please come forward. Chairs shifted. My father blinked. My brother stiffened, confusion tightening his jaw. I stood. The silence was deafening. Then it cracked. One person stood, then 2, then 10. Applause rolled forward like a slow wave, sweeping through the room until nearly everyone was on their feet. My brother stared like he didn't understand what he was seeing. My father's mouth opened slightly, but no words followed. I walked the length of the aisle without looking at them. On stage, the CEO extended her hand and pinned a matte black emblem, small, exact, deliberate, on my lapel. "You've saved lives," she said, her voice low but sure. "You've protected nations. You've shown us what it means to lead from the quiet." I didn't smile. I didn't speak. The applause continued. I scanned the crowd once, not for approval, but for awareness, for the acknowledgement that for all the noise, all the posturing, all the dismissive words I'd swallowed over the years, this time, they saw me, not just as someone who typed fast, not just as someone good with computers, but as Cipher 7. I stepped back from the spotlight, letting the sound swell behind me, not for ego, not for revenge, just to mark the moment the world finally heard what silence could do. The envelope was plain. No return address, no logo, just my name printed neatly across the front. I found it on my desk one morning, sitting on top of a closed folder I hadn't touched since the award ceremony. For a second, I thought it was a thank you note, some formal gesture from HR maybe. Then I opened it. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a brief memo from internal security. Access privileges for Jonathan R. have been revoked effective immediately. Clearance level reassigned pending further review. Attached were audit logs, timestamps, and the summary from the investigation, one that confirmed every edit I had documented, every altered report, every falsified, all clear alert my brother had pushed through under my name. The second item was a handwritten note, no signature. You probably won't hear this from anyone else, but thank you. What you stopped saved lives. We'll make sure it's handled properly this time. I sat with it for a while, rereading the sentence. Not because I needed the praise, but because of what it meant. Someone saw it. Someone understood. I didn't frame the letter. I didn't scan it into a glossy presentation. Instead, I walked over to the small safe in the corner of my office, the one no one else had access to, and placed it inside, right next to two things: my mother's old cipher wheel and the nameplate that used to sit on my father's desk, long since faded. It wasn't vindication that made me close the safe with steady hands. It was peace. I looked out the window. The city skyline shimmered in the early light, glass towers catching the sun like mirrors, reflecting everything and revealing nothing. That was the world I worked to protect. People going about their lives, unaware of how close they sometimes came to catastrophe. That was fine. Let them never know my name. Let them never wonder who caught the breach before it broke through the walls. All I needed was what I'd always kept: the record, the evidence, the truth. Silent, encrypted, but real. Justice doesn't always arrive in courtrooms or conference calls. Sometimes it comes in a sealed envelope, slipped onto your desk before anyone else shows up. Sometimes it's just knowing you did the right thing, even when no one else was watching. The marker squeaked faintly as I wrote the words across the board. What makes information a weapon? Behind me, 15 cadets sat in uneven rows. New recruits, wide-eyed and under-rested, most of them fresh out of undergrad. They had the skills, sure. Fast fingers, flashy code. But what they didn't have yet was stillness. You probably think it's code, I said, turning toward the class. Encryption, malware, social engineering. All of that matters. But information becomes a weapon when you understand timing, when to listen, when to hold, when silence says more than any broadcast. The room was quiet. They were listening. A girl in the back, maybe 19, raised her hand hesitantly. So, when you say silence, do you mean like going dark on comms or... I mean knowing when noise distracts, I said, and when a single line of code can hold more weight than a dozen alerts. Sometimes the strongest move is not what you say, but what you don't let slip. She nodded slowly, then dropped her hand. I erased the board and moved on to the morning's threat modeling exercise, but halfway through, a different student, tall, quiet, sat near the front, spoke up. Are you really Cypher 7? I paused, marker in hand. A couple students turned to look at him, then at me, their faces shifting like someone had just said a ghost name out loud. I didn't answer right away, just capped the marker and gave him a small smile. Why do you ask? He hesitated. They say you stopped attacks no one even saw coming. That you saved lives. That no one ever knew it was you. I shrugged lightly. Some stories are told, some are stored quietly. That was all I said. After class, I stayed behind to wipe down the board. When I returned to my desk, I found a folded note left beside my terminal. It read, I used to think tech people just watch screens. Now I know they decide what the world hears. Thank you. No name, no flourish, just truth. I tucked the note into my bag. The hallway outside hummed with the usual noise. Slamming lockers, half-finished jokes, energy buzzing in every corner. I didn't feel old. I didn't feel done. I felt responsible. I walked out without a word, leaving behind only a blank whiteboard and a question still echoing in the minds of the next protectors. What makes information a weapon? They'd figure it out. I had no doubt. The envelope was padded and scuffed, like it had taken a strange, winding path to get to me. No return address, just my name written neatly in all caps. I opened it at my desk without thinking, assuming it was a printout or document someone had forgotten to send digitally. Inside was a photo. I froze. It was me. 11 years old, kneeling on the garage floor, tangled in wires and dust, one hand buried inside a cracked AM radio, the other balancing a spiral notebook filled with symbols and unfinished code. My hair was a mess. My shirt was 3 sizes too big. But my face, focused, content, absorbed, looked exactly like it did last night when I lost 2 hours mapping out a new encryption pattern just for fun. On the back, in small handwriting. Some names don't need to be spoken, they're already remembered. I didn't know who had sent it. Maybe my mother had saved it and passed it along through someone I'd never meet. Maybe someone from the neighborhood found it buried in old boxes. Maybe it didn't matter. I placed the photo on the edge of my desk and stared at it for a long time. Not out of nostalgia, but recognition. I still had the notebook from that day. Still had the radio too, though it never worked right. I had long since passed the point of needing validation, of chasing acknowledgement. But this was different. This was memory. This was truth. I opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet and pulled out the fellowship letter, the one I'd printed and saved all those years ago. I found a frame, the simple wood kind with no decoration, and placed the two side by side, the letter that started it and the moment that explained why. I didn't frame my awards, didn't hang certificates on the wall. I had drawers full of medals, commendations, nameplates, but I only displayed this because it wasn't about what I'd achieved. It was about who I'd always been, even before the world saw it. The afternoon sun drifted through the window and landed softly on the glass. For a moment, the light hit just right. Not dramatic, not staged, just enough to see clearly. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Not for anyone else, not for history or headlines, just for that girl on the floor, soldering parts no one understood, speaking a language the world hadn't learned to listen to yet. Turns out, she'd been right all along.